Welcome to Voices from the Field podcast presented by Extra Inning Softball, where the stories are real, the conversations are honest, and the game goes way beyond the field. We're bringing you insight, inspiration, and all things softball from the people shaping the sport.
Welcome back to Extra Inning Softball podcast, Voices from the Field. I'm joined by Laina Holmgren and Jayden Mount with Extra Inning, and this is going to be a really fun, exciting, very informative podcast because we are talking about all things ranking. When we talk about that, what we're thinking about is the nomination forms, the evaluation process, the new regional boards that we have that are going out there, the coach and organizational leader input, national tournament coverage, basically everything that goes along with it, because I've been with Extra Inning for just about a year now, and the amount of changes that have happened in the time that I've been there with the way the company is trying to be the most legitimate ranking company out there and doing a thorough job is pretty exciting. Laina has just joined us, and she assists the ranking committee, and she and I are kind of the liaisons between the ranking committee to try to get as much input on each of these individuals. But I think the first thing I want to start with, so that people understand and kind of hear what Jayden and Laina have to say, is for the class of 2028 ranking that's just starting to come out, we had over 1,200 nominations. I say that because that's really dumbfounding. 1,200 young women, and we still probably don't even have another 1,000 kids that were nominated. So I think the best thing that we can say about Extra Inning Softball is that there is a system being built that's being put out there, because the best way to evaluate everybody would be have everybody sitting and playing in front of the ranking committee so you could evaluate them like recruiters do. Unfortunately, that's just absolutely impossible for a ranking committee to get out there and see them. Although we do have staff that goes out and watches tournaments, we can't cover everybody. So with that, just knowing that we have 1,200 or had 1,200 nominations, and just the amount of time and energy that is put into it. I'd love to hear both of your guys' input.
Yeah, I mean, we get that nomination form can sometimes be a little bit time consuming, a little daunting. I think that we need to stress how important it is to really convey that information to the rankings committee. 1,200 is a massive amount of girls, right? And they all deserve recognition in their own right. So it's really important to kind of sift through and make sure that we know how many national tournaments that they've gone to, what team they're currently playing for, if they switch teams, or any of their personal accomplishments. I think that the more that Carie and I can convey to the rankings committee and get them information, really form that well-rounded picture, it helps them out a lot. And if there's a lack of that information just because you don't really want to fill out the form the right way, that might hurt your kid in the long run. And I don't know about you guys, but having the most information possible, even if it takes the ranking committee years to rank the class, that's better than not having enough information, right?
Yeah. No, I think the same thing. I think the rankings committee does a great job of looking at different things, like the national tournaments, like the stats, like who they're playing against. Are they the number one pitcher on their team? Are they the number two? Do they play in the championship game? I think all of that stuff is super crucial for them to look at going into it. And also, less is more. If you're putting less things on there, but they're more the most accurate things, they're the most up-to-date stats you have, dates, tournaments, different things like that, who you're playing against, the best of the best that you're playing against. I think that is something that is very crucial for them to know and to look at, because their eyes are probably cross looking through everything. I can only imagine, but I think they do a great job, and I think, not being biased, but we probably are the best rankings company out there, and they just do a great job, and there's no ties. I think that's something that's really huge for us as well.
I think one of the things that I'd like to talk about with Laina and I assisting the ranking committee was how much difference there was between athletes that were from the same team, specifically when it came down to the number of national tournaments. With a lot of research, and when the committee was looking at it, there's a formula that goes into play. Obviously, there's a software program that takes in all the stats and helps go through and looks at red flags. If there was somebody that said they had 1,000 ERA, we obviously know that there's something wrong with that. Then we reach out and confirm and get those kind of things. But with what I'm trying to say with that is we had kids who played on the same team. So let's say Jayden and Laina were playing for the Birmingham Thunderbolts, and Jayden had 7 national tournaments, but Laina only had 2. What if you don't list those? That's going to hurt you because, a 300 batting average from a young woman who's played in 6 to 7 national tournaments compared to someone who's got a 490 batting average who's played in 1 national tournament, there's got to be some weight to that. So it's really, really important to take that time and to make sure that you list all of that. Obviously in an ideal world, you'd have one manager for one team filling out everything, but that's just not the case. You have organizational leaders doing it for the whole organization. They might miss one. Maybe it's parents, but I think the amount of time and detail is really, really important to put it in there to make sure that your player gets the most fair evaluation as possible. And, I did it as a coach and I nominated players, and I can tell you how frustrating sometimes it felt because it's long. We are meeting constantly as a company to try to find a way to do it. But one of the things that I would tell you is I feel like in looking at that nomination form is that we had a lot of people spending a lot of time in giving us information to give to the committee that, in all honesty, wasn't necessary. And it's wonderful information that I love that these young women are attending FCA and that they, were the volleyball MVP in 8th grade and stuff. But the bottom line is, as we are evaluating softball at an elite level to get the best things. So I would really like to think moving forward that it's really restricted to what are your softball athletic accomplishments. And that's what is so important for us to be looking at. So I think that's something that I would love to see, that the ranking committee gets a little bit more fine detailed information since they can't put their eyes on the players at all time.
Yeah, you had mentioned something earlier too. You mentioned kind of the formula that the ranking committee uses. And I think it's important for viewers to kind of understand and realize that, think about how the collegiate softball playoffs work, right? It's a combination of RPI, strength of schedule. It's a big combo of stats that mean really important things. Or you can take any sport. We're obviously a softball company, so we want to work like the college softball playoffs. But even how football has changed in the last year, where strength of schedule means a heck of a lot more than other things, right? I'm not saying that that's how our rankings committee works, but that's why when Carrie's talking about how we have had to kind of relay information back and forth between checking these certain national tournament numbers and going back and forth and verifying it with the rankings committee, it's difficult because that is part of the formula. And so if you have 7 national tournaments and you have your stats that are excellent and your teammate has 2 national tournaments, that really creates a big cloud of confusion for the rankings committee, because what happened? Were you injured? We have to check all the notes that you submitted to see if you were. Were you on Team USA? And maybe that's why you played those tournaments. Well, that's good information to know too. So it's really almost a teeter-totter. But if you don't put those in just because you're like, oh, well, so-and-so, or maybe you're a coach nominating your team. Well, I put it in for the first kid I nominated. The rest, they'll understand that the rest went to the same tournaments. The ranking committee doesn't understand that, because when we're looking at these nominations, we're looking at each individual kid, and the committee, it doesn't know. I mean, yes, it says it on the side, but we're not going to tell the committee, hey, you need to rank all these kids together because they're on the same team. No, the committee looks at each individual kid's stats, where they played, all that good stuff. So they rank the individual and not the team member. So it's a really hard assumption to say, hey, they're going to understand they went to the same tournaments as their teammates. So that's a really important thing when you're thinking about formula.
Yeah, I definitely like that. And I think the thing about it is the one thing that I want everybody to know about extra innings softball, and I don't care what ranking committee is out there, I'm just talking about our company. We don't do phone calls. We don't do last minute emails. We don't do rankings are released. Oh, I forgot so-and-so, and then go put them in as a tie. Once that nomination closes, it's done. And I feel like, do an incredible job. And if there's somebody out there that can email us or tell us another place that it needs to happen, we are emailing, we are texting, we do text blasts. It's all over our website. We've got a countdown with it, like how many days are left. And what is really neat to talk about that nomination form that we added is like, hey, puts people that you've played against, names that you suggest we go look for, and we'll try to go do it. The company spends a ton of time going through Twitter and going through Instagram looking for that class that's currently, being nominated to encourage people to nominate. And I think what most people don't understand is now that we have started to break records and get 1,200, not everybody's going to be ranked in that. There's going to be an honorable mention, but there's 300 spots total per position per class. You've got your elite, your select, and your prospect. And I think a lot of people go, well, then I'm just not going to nominate if I'm not going to get it. Well, that's crazy because there's going to be a lot of those honorable mention kids that go on to play in college.
Yeah.
And I think I can take that to where people think about, oh my gosh, well, my kid should have been in the top 50 and she was 52 and they feel like it's a put down. I'm thinking the top 300 are playing in college. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's crazy, And so I think we're getting better and better at it as far as fine tuning the way we're doing it. But I cannot stress enough about that nomination form. And I get it. Like, I get it. It's time consuming. It's this,
Yeah.
but it's, if you want your daughter or your players to be the most fairly evaluated, it's got to start with a nomination form, because Laina and I can't even help the ranking committee reach out and ask questions about your daughter or your player if they're not nominated. So in an ideal world, maybe there will be a button that just gives us all the players and then we send it out to people. But until that happens, we can't help the ranking committee get any more. You know what? Quite frankly, with 1,200, I don't know if they want more. So with that being said, I think that's kind of a cool thing to really think about. I want to ask both of you to talk about the measurable in the national tournaments, because the one thing I don't want people out there to come across from this is that we think that the national tournament is the end all be all. It really isn't. A lot of young women can choose to play regionally and still get very well ranked and still make the Elite 100. I think that's really, really important. I think the biggest thing is you got to look at the time that it takes and the amount of money that it does, and does it fit your family's budget. So it doesn't have to be it, but I think that's the other thing that I would encourage anybody out there, that send us your best regional tournaments that are out there. I think we have a pretty good handle on the national tournaments, but we'd like to get the top regional tournaments built up, because, national if it's got a number system, so you understand, it might be 5 points. High regional could be 4 points, local regional 3 and on down. And there's that formula that says, hey, this strength of schedule is in the elite, this is in the select, and this is in the prospect. So talk a little bit about that from both of you, because you're much closer to it than I am from playing. Heck, I played women's open at 12, so I never played travel ball, so I don't even understand all that good stuff. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that just coming off of the collegiate coaching scene, right? I think that there are a lot of regions out there that have a really dense concentration of colleges in the area, and they have a really dense concentration of kids playing softball, and it's awesome. One region that really rings a bell to me, or like really reminds me of this, is the Midwest. There are places like Iowa where they have their high school season in the fall, or you could have so many regional things just in the Midwest, and you're still going to go play college softball, right? If that makes more sense for your family and for your family's finances, and you're going to get the looks from the colleges that you want to go to, and you stay close to home, why not? And I think that the rankings committee really understands that. If you guys can send us, here are the best regional tournaments in the area and they're really competitive, or these are the kinds of teams that are playing in them and they also placed here in a national tournament, we can give that to the rankings committee. And good stats are good stats, guys, right? Like, we're not going to argue a 500 batting average, right? That would be crazy. And they understand that, right? So it's a balancing act, but there are regions like that where they have so many colleges in the area. You can play your whole life regionally and succeed and then go play college in that same area. And I think that's totally possible. The Midwest is just an example. Those regions are all over the place. And especially when Jayden and I have talked about fit so much on Madness Mondays, if you understand your fit and you're someone that's from a region that doesn't ever want to leave that region, we can tell the ranking committee, and the ranking committee, they get it too. A lot of them have played and coached, etc. they understand that if you understand your fit, there's no reason to go beyond that, right? So just kind of having that big picture of these kids is really helpful. But we do need to know what regional tournaments are in your area for sure.
Yeah, I think going off of like my personal experience, I'm from Texas, so I played in Colorado one time, and my parents were like, "Yeah, you're not playing in the West, like we don't need to go out there, right?" And then I played in Oregon, so that was like two of my biggest tournaments that I ever played in. But my parents were like, "I'm spending so much money on you playing softball, and if you're gonna go 12 hours away, we're not gonna see you play." So that's kind of when I made that decision to stay close to home, play close to home, so that my parents could see me play. And it was definitely a blessing. So, like you said, those regions, like if you want to stay at home, I mean, those regional tournaments are big too. And I think going off of just kind of recruiting at ULM and then recruiting at South, like they're not going to the same tournaments where ULM is staying more west of the Mississippi, and then South Alabama is staying more east of the Mississippi. They're getting the Florida kids, where ULM is getting the Texas kids. So I think just figuring out where you want to play, and then also just based on the rankings committee, like they can help, or they can see like what tournaments you're playing in, what regions, and that's where it's going to help too, where they can or where you can send in the tournaments that you're playing in, the best region tournaments, because we pretty much know, just as an extra inning softball staff, like what tournaments are the national tournaments. So figuring out where the best regional tournaments would help the rankings committee a ton.
Yeah, and I think the thing that I'd like to really hit on again, and just kind of let you guys add what you think about it too, is when you talk about a formula, obviously the stats are important to be as accurate as possible, but stats are only as good as the people keeping them, so that people might debate on that kind of stuff. Is it little Susie's dad doing it? Is it someone who knows the game? All that kind of stuff. But I think stats are huge. The stats go into that software that has nothing to do with human touch, which is phenomenal. It gets spit out. The computer will then rank the kids based on just stats. Then it takes Laina and I going through and combing out how many national tournaments to be able to kind of rank that, so that we get it organized for the ranking committee. But then I'd like to talk that obviously the national tournaments tell you the strength of schedule, or the regional tournaments. But then I'd like to say is, I've heard people say, well, her team finished first. Well, that's great, but that's the team. That's not the individual. We're not ranking teams right now. They're ranking individuals. So we need to know that. So if Laina was on the Birmingham Thunderbolts, who won the national title, that's awesome. Obviously, she's a member of a great team, but Laina hit 200. That doesn't make Laina one of the top 100 hitters in the country just because she played for the Birmingham Thunderbolts. So those are things that we want to talk about. So that team success versus individual success. And then the thing that we saw a lot in this class that I thought was very interesting in organizing it is how many of these young kids play up an age division. You get a lot of these, class of 2028s that should be in 14U that we're playing 16U. On a national competitive team, we even had a couple that played 18U on national competitive teams. So all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, this is a young woman holding her own against kids who are 3 or 4 years older than her. That plays a big part of it. When they're competing against older, stronger national schedule, that's a big thing that comes into play. So I'd love to hear some thoughts from both of you.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, in the what else or anything else, or in the club team name, to include what actual team name with the age division that these girls are playing in, because it is really impressive when you've got a kid that should theoretically be playing 14U and they're playing up on 16U, 18U. I think that's really important, because then the ranking committee then even has to look at, okay, if these kids have identical stats and one is playing 14U and one is playing 18U, it's kind of a little bit more impressive that the one kid has those stats at 18U, and that has to be something to be taken into account. So that's kind of like a little bit more of that human side outside of that formula, because the computer doesn't know, right? The computer doesn't know about 18U, 16U, 14U, but humans do. Past players and coaches do, right? So that's really important. I think another thing that I thought of earlier, Carie, when you were speaking, was about the number of at bats and the number of chances that these kids are getting, right? Because you mentioned just because your team wins nationals, but you're sitting there at a 200 batting average, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're one of the very, very top in the country just because you're on that team. It's awesome. And of course, you're on that team for a reason, right? So we do need to take that into consideration when we're relaying information to the committee. But I think that it's really hard for the committee to sit there and look at someone with 20 at bats throughout a whole fall and a summer and fairly rank them next to a kid that has 200 plus at bats, right? So if there's a reason that might have happened, or if there's an injury that happened or something, like those details also need to be in the nomination form somewhere, because that makes the ranking committee's job really, really hard. They're sending info back to us like, hey, is this number accurate? Can you guys reach out to them? So I think just putting that information in there. Maybe you were on an 18 team, but maybe you were the third string. Okay. Put that information in there. Put the athletic accomplishments, playing 2 age divisions up, playing behind really excellent players, fighting at their heels, trying to get that starting spot. Stuff like that really, really helps out the committee because they need a whole picture of what's going on. If you just put an 18U team, 20 at bats, that's kind of tough for them because they're in between a rock and a hard place of like, okay, it's impressive that she's playing up, but is she really playing enough to be nationally ranked? So just keep those things in mind when you're nominating, or if there's something that you would look at if you were on the committee and be like, that's kind of weird, just put a little note somewhere in there because that helps them out a ton.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of 2 things when you talk about that. I hear stats tell one story, but performance against the best in the country or age groups that tell another story.
Yeah.
And that's that gray area that has to be kind of whittled away on both of those two, that I think is really important. And I agree. Like if somebody has that 20, 30, 40 at bats, that's hard for them to rank. It doesn't matter that they hit 600 when someone has 150 and they hit 400. That's a big difference for them to be able to look at. And I think I'd like to really address the injury process, because it is extra innings policy that we don't rank injured players, because the rankings are supposed to be strictly from the past year. It's not what you did in the year before or coming up. And I know that sounds hard because people say, well, they should be able to look at the last 2 years. We're going off the nomination form for the ranking committee.
Mhm.
And so, although that's hard, I think people will have to well, they don't have to, but they should know and understand that, we will rank young women who completed one full season. Like, did they compete in the fall and maybe they got hurt and didn't play in the summer, or they were hurt in the summer and completed in the fall. But even doing that, they've got 60, 70 at bats in that process. So you can do that. But one of the things I would love everybody to know is if you have a young woman that has been injured, it's not the end of what's happening to them. And we love to celebrate those overcoming adversities and just do a voices from the field interview with those young women. Heck, they probably get better coverage than the kids that are being ranked because they get to have a 20-minute interview that tells, this is where I was, this is what's happened, this is how I've overcome it, this is why I'm excited to get back. So people get to know them even more so as individual players than the ones being ranked. So I think that's really, really important. And you can always nominate and then say injured on the form, because then it's going to be Laina or I or Jayden reaching out saying to you basically, hey, fill this out. Let's get this overcoming adversity and get you recognized and get you some recognition that will help you further that recruiting process. Because the facts of the matter is everybody at some point in time is going to be injured. So it's not the end of the world. It's just basically how do you respond to it and come back. So I definitely agree that stats tell one story, and who those stats are against, whether it's age division or the number of tournaments, I think are huge. I would love to kind of turn and go to the voices that matter. When the ranking starts to happen, let's talk about the coaches, let's talk about the organizations, and then let's talk about the regional board. The regional board is something that I pushed really hard with for the ranking committee, because I think all of us would agree that the only way to do the best job possible in ranking these young women is to have as many eyes on these young women as possible. So who better than the amount of people that play within the region? So I do believe, Laina, and you can correct me, that we had built up the regional board up to 3 to 5 per region.
Mhm.
I think our goal is always to have 3 to 5 per class. Now, obviously, if they don't get that information back to us, but most of them were pretty handy on getting that information back. And these are people they've played against. And so it's really important for me to make sure that people understand that these regional board members said a lot of great things about players on other teams. I don't think or can think of one that said, "Oh, absolutely no way, this person's terrible." We didn't have any of that. It was really like, "Tell me what you knew." And they'd say, like, "She did this against our team. She did this against our team." Or, I had several times tell the ranking committee that if this kid was playing more outside her region, she'd be in the top 50. Just people don't know about her. So I think those things are really huge. And anyone listening to this, I would love if you're interested in the regional and being on the regional board, do it, and it's a lot like my recruiting when I was in college coaching. You can sell me a bag of lemons, but you're only going to sell me a bag of lemons once, so I think most of the people that we're dealing with were very ethical in what they did. And if they didn't know, they didn't know. But I think, and Laina, you can correct me, we had a multiple times when we would ask about someone from a region, if they didn't know, they'd say, "Hang on, let me make a few phone calls." And they would call and talk to other
Yeah,
people who had seen them play. What more can you ask for your daughter to be in the names of other coaches' mouths?
totally.
Because quite frankly, that's what it's all about, is getting your daughter's name out so she does get the right fit of what you're talking about. So I'd love to hear some of your thought process on the regional board, the organizational leaders, coaches, all that good stuff.
Yeah, guys, the softball community is so cool. The amount of interactions that we've had with these regional board members or organizational leaders, I mean, everyone wanted to boost each other up. What I thought was so cool when I was giving information back and forth between the board members and the committee was just the fact that these regional board members, they take pride in their region, right? So they want their region represented really, really well. So there's no reason for them to put one kid up higher, sandbag another kid. Like, it's just not there. And I think there's a little part of us sometimes, if we might be thinking that's going on, or, oh, someone wants their kid above another kid. That's not what was going on at all. I mean, we have organization leaders, regional board members that don't have a dog in the fight, right? We had board members that didn't even have kids ranked or didn't even have kids nominated, I mean to say. And they were spending their time nominating or talking about different kids within their region to do right by their region and to do right by the rankings. And I thought that was so cool. I think that if they, again, Carie, you talked about it, if they didn't know, they said, "Hey, we faced this team a couple times, but I don't know enough about them to say anything about it." Or, "Hey, I've seen this kid. She's pretty decent, but I don't know enough," right? There was no one that was just being malicious about it. It was just really good softball community feedback in the interest of their own region. It was very cool to see. And it was very trusted people within the softball community too. I think that the rankings committee and our company specifically, we have, for lack of a better term, our tentacles in so many different places, right? That there are people in, like, really, really good people in this community, and they want the best for softball as a whole. And those are the people that we want to contact. Those are the people we want feedback from. People that are at all the tournaments all the time, seeing everyone. There are so many people on these boards that, again, they might not even be coaching a team that we're talking about. They might not even be having a kid on any of these teams, right? So really getting those objective opinions helps the committee out a lot, because yes, the committee can travel, or yes, people from EIS are at certain tournaments and stuff. But again, you guys, you have to remember, over 1,200 kids. That would be a lot of traveling and a lot of employees, right? To get feet on the ground to see all 1,200 of these kids. So taking those regional board members or those organizational leads, taking their opinions really means a lot, because they're the ones seeing the kids all the time, all day, every day, seeing them, how they recover from failure, seeing them at their best, seeing them throughout an entire season. And you guys know how many games you play in a season, right? There are some days alone with 5+ games a day. So it's important to get that information from them. And they did a phenomenal job this year. They really did.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
kind of going off of that too. Because I met with a ton of 2028 coaches before the nomination form had closed, and I would ask them, like, hey, like we have this regional board. You're a trusted coach in this area. Like, would you like to be on it? And they were like, absolutely. Like, we want to do anything and everything we can for you guys because we are, like, not to brag, but we are doing so much for softball and we're growing the game in a positive direction. We're all women of Christ, and I think that they can see that, and I think that is something that's so like cool that nobody else really does. Like, we have our Faith Friday, we have our Wisdom Wednesday. I think that's not softball related, but it is in a sense. And there's so much more things out in this world than softball. But we're bringing that to the softball community, and they can understand like who we are as people, because we're getting out in the community, we're building relationships, and I think that kind of goes for the regional board too. They don't want what's best for their kid, they want what's best for softball in general. For the softball world, they want all these kids to succeed, they want them to go to college, they want them to be women of faith after college. So I think that kind of just meeting with those coaches and just kind of talking about what we're doing in a sense of not just for softball but for these girls that are going into life after softball.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I would love to make sure that people understand is the regional board is kept anonymous because we don't want it to ever be where people feel like they can influence other people. And by being able to be anonymous, they can, now the ranking committee knows who they are, but the people who are watching, that way, there's never any pressure to feel like you have to play differently in front of someone or somebody's evaluating you. You know, you're able to do that, as well as the ranking committee. You know, the ranking committee is comprised of former college coaches that have multiple years of coaching. I would love sometime to sit down and add up all the years of coaching from the ranking committee of who's actually doing it. They've all played. And I think now would be the time that I want to really reinforce. I love that Jayden brought up it's a faith-based. And not only is it a faith-based, it is a woman-owned and woman-ran only company. You know, and there's something to be said about that. I'm not hating on my daddies or my male counterparts out there, but these are women who have played the game at the highest level, competed, recruited, coached, you know, whether they coached in travel ball, whether they coached in college. It's a lot about the game, and they're not getting paid to do what they're doing. So they're doing it for the love of the game and really to advance the cause for these young women, because the bottom line is this game is getting to where these young women can make a living at it. And so anything that extra inning softball can do to kind of help give them that base and give them the fair evaluation that they can, you know, some of it is on the onus of the coach and the parents to get the information, and the rest lies on the kids to go play and perform and compete and know that none of this is going to determine where you land. It's just something that's fun to celebrate. It's something fun to brag about. It's something that you can help build your brand with. But outside of that, if you're in the rankings, whether it's elite, select, prospects, even honorable mention, if you want to play college ball, you can go play college ball.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's a good measuring tool through that process. And I would love, and I think Jayden can probably add a lot into this and kind of rotate here and really talk about the watch list, because extra inning softball no longer ranks 10 and 12U softball players. And I know when Bonnie, our CEO, made that decision, that was a hard decision to make because that's a lot of money she cut out. That's a lot of subscriptions that she cut out or memberships that she cut out because everybody joined to see where their kid was. And the thought process behind that had to do with 10 and 12U is about development and fun and the energy and getting them ready. So putting them on a watch list was a huge thing for us to decide to do. It was like, hey, let's go watch these kids. Let's go celebrate these kids. But how do you evaluate a 10 and 12U? How do you even evaluate them? You know, you can't, like, from a national tournament standpoint or anything like that. So they got put on these regional watch lists. And I think it was something I celebrated, and it's something that I think was so needed within our sport. I'd love to see it all go to a watch list and go more like that college thing to where, you know, you kind of did the final 50 and the 25s, and we can talk about that soon with what's coming up. But I think it's so exciting to know that we can celebrate 10, 12Us, get them to play with passion for the love of the game and get all that kind of stuff, and not ever be afraid to make a mistake because of a ranking at 10 or 12U.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. So I would love to hear Jayden's thought process and how that even affected you, maybe as one of the editors of the information from the influencers from kids like that age.
Yeah. I thought it was a really cool thing that we've incorporated. We just finished, or we did it last December. That was our very first one, and I got to meet with a ton of these players with their parents, and they were just super excited to just be on that watch list. And a bunch of their parents were like, "We're so glad you did the watch list. Like, we didn't want them to be ranked. Like, I mean, it just messes with you from a mental standpoint, from a physical standpoint. But and like you said, Carie, like how are you gonna evaluate these kids? Like they're not playing at PGF, they're not playing at Top Gun. They're playing at these little regional tournaments. They're learning how to slide, they're learning how to hit. These parents also like they've got to figure out how to understand the travel ball realm. I mean, they're not flying all over the country and have a schedule. We didn't have turning machine when I was younger. I don't know how my mom and dad did all that without turning machine.
I still can't do turning
Game
machine. I just
changer.
asked somebody.
I know, like even as like when I was recruiting, like turning machine, I mean you had to make sure everything was correct on there. So I just thought it was a really cool thing. These girls are just playing the game because they love it. Obviously they have big hopes and big dreams like we all did when we were younger, but just seeing those kids light up and just get to talk about like their journey, their short little journey, it made me really happy because it felt like we were doing something that is growing the game in a positive way. And then they can look forward to getting ranked. And then we also had the Rising Star influencers where they got to write an article about something they're passionate about. So some have already gone through injuries, like you said, somebody's going to get injured at some point. A lot of them talked about the mental game, and some of them just talked about the joy of having a good coach. And I think that since they're like already thinking about having a good coach, like they're steps ahead of as what I was when I was younger. I was just playing softball because I like to play softball, you know. But I just thought it was something really cool that we started. Those I think those are opening back up October 30th. So I think that's for 2031, 32, and 33, which is kind of crazy. Yeah. So I graduated in 2016, so it's I mean literally almost 15 years.
I'm not even telling you when I graduated.
But I just think it's really cool. And Carie, you can maybe talk about a little bit about Macy going into like she's committed, she's in her senior year now. Like is she playing the game like she's like 10 years old again since that weight has lifted off her shoulders?
I think what I've noticed is she is probably more passionate about it than she's ever been. And mostly because it's all about the preparation of being ready. I think it's really interesting from that age group and even within her own team, you see one or two roads taken. Oh, it's over. I'm done. I've made it. And they coast, which I'm not sure they're going to see the outcome they want. And then where I'm watching my daughter go right now, like I am having to force her saying, no, you need a day off. You need to take one day off. Like even Jesus said, rest a day. Like you need one day. Like, so I think that part of it is really, really exciting to see when, as a parent, you've invested all this time and that she's, invested all this time for her to be more passionate about it now than she was even a year ago. And I would tell you, I was probably a little surprised even with her because with me being in coaching and with me coaching her team and doing the recruiting and ranking and her growing up in a dugout, when I actually heard an interview that she did with Carie where she said, it just became so stressful. And I was like, how could she get stressed? Like we talked about it all. And even my own kid was stressed, and I think what I saw is the stress is that she had so many incredible offers, so many incredible options. And at 16, how are you supposed to know for sure that you're picking it? Like picking the right place and knowing that even when you're picking the right place, because in your gut it's the right place, she had to let a lot of other people that she really liked and who grew a relationship with and she cared about. And it's almost like, I think she felt like I'm not going to be talking to those people again.
Yeah.
And yes, she's right. But in 3 or 4 years, no, it'll be people that she knows if she chooses to stay within the sport. So for me to see her take that big, deep breath and go, I've done it. Like I've done what I came to do and then enjoyed it for literally maybe a week And then it was like, I want to play as a freshman. I want to do these things. And so really go to another level. Like every night I probably see my kid roll into the house at about 8:30 because she's going to school. She's going to the high school practice. She's, out working with younger kids. And then the next thing you know, I've got to go get a lift in. I've got to go do these things, so it's fun for me to sit back and do it. But yes, I definitely feel like she feels like, whew, I can breathe. And then no, I can't breathe because now I got to work harder.
Yeah.
So I think, but it's a different level. I think it went from a lot of pressure, a lot of weight to more of a lot of motivation. And I don't want to take a day off so that I can never say what if. What if I would have worked out one more time? What if I would have, worked on my swing one more time? So I know I'm ready. My arm is physically ready for her to be Courtney Deifel's issue because I'm having a hard time blow drying my hair in the morning. I'm like, sis, you got an old mom and a broken arm. So yeah, I definitely think that's huge. And I think this would be a good time. It can almost kind of be like a break to really allow us to talk about, we've done that 10-12U watch list. And now we're kind of sandwiching it from the other side now. Here we have these 2026. That's what Macy is. They're getting ready to sign in November. Some of them sign earlier if they go to JUCO or D2 and stuff like that. But we're transitioning into kind of a new era with that class too. And I'm so super excited to see it and where it's going. But it's turning into watch list as well. And we're going to do it by divisions. So it's going to be your JUCO, your D2, D3, mid-major, power four. So I think it's going to be a way to celebrate even more players within their fit, like you talked about. I probably will even throw out there, I can't wait to see how we break it down within those divisions of doing a watch list, then the final 100, then the top 50, then the final 25. And I'm probably messing up all the names. Bonnie will correct me later. But then, down to a player of the year per division and letting it go through the whole fall high school season and into the summer. I think will allow for a lot of people to have some highs and lows. And it really transitions that class to welcome to college because this is what it's going to be like. And I'm so excited to see that play out. And I know we are still doing an unranked 2026 player ranking, whether it's regional or national. I'm not quite sure that's been determined because we've got to see how many are actually out there so that we can really allow them to use us to help find their fit still. Because if there's 2026s that are not committed, and there are multiple that have decommitted because there's been coaching changes and all that stuff. And don't get me started on the portal and all that good stuff because that opens up a whole nother can of worms. But if there's that we can find a way to help them find their place by giving them a ranking, I think that's going to be a really huge thing to talk about. So I'm excited for that to happen. We have so many things going on. I had a whole bunch of questions that I kind of wrote down for us to talk about that I've heard over the course of the last year, and I'm going to ask them and let you guys kind of answer them. The first one that came up is, why did a player with better stats rank lower than another? And I think we've touched it a little bit, but I think just for them to hear that one more time would be great.
Yeah, I think some of the feedback we've gotten from the committee is kind of, sometimes that formula comes into play more so than some might think. It's not just stat based. We did touch on it a little bit earlier. If you didn't play any national tournaments, no national competition, and you have a 400 batting average, that is awesome. It's incredible. It depends on the region you're in and all that good stuff for the committee to look at. But if you have someone playing in 7 national tournaments throughout an entire fall and summer, and they have a 380 batting average, right? On paper, 400 is more than 380. We can all agree with that. But the level of competition differs. And that's where that formula comes into play. So I know that sometimes, especially when you are that 400 hitter and you worked your tail off and you're like, wait, how can that be? Sometimes it is kind of a beat to say, hey, I'm playing this competition, they're playing that competition, because we just talked about that 2026 watch list too and preparing them for college. And I know that this group, the 2028s, they're young, right? But it's never too early to start thinking about that too. I mean, you can look at a P4 kid hitting 350. That might mean a little bit different than maybe a mid-major kid hitting that 400 number, right? And it's just, you never know. It just comes into play. It's just kind of that look in the mirror of like, okay, who are you playing? Were they awesome or did you smash them all day, every day? And then this other kid, are you playing really tough competition all the time? Is every single day a dogfight and you still come out on top every time, or 400 batting average percent of the time, right? So that factors in a little bit for that committee. And that's some of the feedback we've been hearing. It's tough sometimes for them to be like, these two are really close. Who's facing the best of the best more consistently? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
Jayden,
that.
Yeah, and Carie, I think you said it earlier. It was stats tell one story, but performance against
yeah,
the best of the best tells another. I think that's great because I mean, just going into say like when an SEC team is playing an SEC team, just take Oklahoma, Texas for example. When Tegan Caban is throwing against these Oklahoma hitters compared to maybe like say a mid-major team compared to the Oklahoma hitters, I mean that's gonna be like their team batting average might be 750 against a mid-major, where it might be 125 against Tegan Caban, you know? So I think that's puts it kind of into perspective. Like, are you playing the best of the best? Are you coming in clutch against the best of the best? Are you moving runners? I mean, there's a ton of different things. In like even pitchers, your batting average against the best of the best versus people that just play in little regional tournaments may be different as well. So I think that is kind of something to look into. Yes, stats are great. Stats are like, I mean, with the rankings committee looking at these stats, I mean, that's what they're looking at, but there's so much more than just stats. There's another story to be told with that. And I think just putting that into perspective from the college level, I think is something we can think about too.
Yeah, and I love that you said that because I made several phone calls to several Power Four coaches about players.
Mhm.
When the ranking committee says, like, we've got these 3 players and we don't know how to split them up, I just called and said, hey, because who's seen the top 3 players in the country play more than your Power Four coaches, and just said, hey, where would you rank these kids? And I listen to what they say and just get that input so that I can relay that to them. And I think the story I'd love to share is I made a phone call to a regional board member whose player was ranked higher than another player I was asking about. And when I said, hey, tell me about your player, where's this player compared to this player? That coach stopped dead in their tracks and said, look, at the end of the day, I hate to do this, but that other player is better than mine. So if anything, that player should be in front of mine. That to me spoke volumes that we're barking up the right trees of what we're doing, and we're getting the information and getting the best. One of the questions that I've been asked before, and I'd love to, I mean, I don't think there's a great answer, but it's, can a player move up or down quickly between ranking dates? Well, first of all, we rank every year. So it's not quick in anything we're doing. It's once a year, like with this class of 2028, for Pete's sake. I mean, they haven't been ranked since last July. So we're already past that. So I don't think they're going to move up or down quickly by any stretch of the imagination. But I cannot reiterate enough is that every ranking has to do with what you've done in the last year, not what you did 2 years ago, not what you did anything. And I think the best thing I can say is look at the NC2A Division One All-Americans. There are people who are player of the year one year, and they might not make but third team the year after. It's because it has to do with that year. It doesn't have anything to do with past performances. And so I think that's really important, but I'd love to hear whatever you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, I think that the committee's always going to look at everything objectively. They don't really have a list of like, okay, where did we rank them last time? Let's stay in the same ballpark. They don't do that, right? I think what's important to remember though is kind of the scene of travel ball nowadays. How many people do you know switch teams often, right? Throughout their summers. And I think that it's really important to remember that if they're playing on a team that plays both regionally and nationally, and then they switch to a team that might be playing only nationally and they're playing the best of the best all the time, you might see a big jump in those numbers because maybe you're getting a kid that was playing kind of mid-level competition pretty consistently, but now she's playing the best of the best all the time. And if she has the same stats from the year before, again, it's not like the committee's sitting there going like, okay, she was here, now we're going to bump her way up. But as an objective committee, they're going to look at that name, look at, again, the whole formula that the software spits out, and then they get the human side of it. What are the number of national tournaments? That's where you can see that kind of big jump. Or Carie even talked about it. Sometimes players, and this is sometimes older when they commit and then they're like, cool, I've made it. Now I can coast. Maybe they went from a really, really highly competitive national team and maybe they're like, I got the looks that I'm going to get. Now let me play regionally. You might see a difference in those numbers from year to year, but that's just level of competition. We talked about it earlier and who you're facing, right? So that is a part of the formula. And we're not saying any one player is going to have the best year of their entire life and then absolutely bomb the next year. That's not where you're going to see those big rises and drops of numbers, especially if they're keeping the same team and keeping the level of competition. I think more so than that, if they're doing some big switches in their teams and the tournaments they're going to, that might be where you see those bigger rises and drops of ranking numbers.
Right. And then the last question I'm going to use, and we got a lot of them, and we might have to do another podcast because this is getting long, but does social media hype or recruiting buzz impact the rankings? And I can tell you, I'm going to answer this and let you guys bounce off of this. No, the hype and just showing like great play after play, but showing plays in at bat on Twitter, on Instagram, it does the same thing that gets coaches to come out and watch you play, and I can tell you that the ranking committee uses social media a lot to go check. If there's two kids that are back to back, like, okay, should this kid be in the top 50 or not, and they're relying on the regional board information and the coach's input, they might go back to go and just kind of stalk the social media to watch it, because where else are they going to get it? And that goes to, on the nomination form, include good video footage of yourself, not just something that, I used to always say as a college coach, be careful what video you send me, because most of the time I'm going to find somebody else on your team that I want more than you. So make sure the video you're sending is showing and showcasing yourself. I think that's really important, but I don't think it's not going to get you ranked higher, but it certainly can help tell a story or complete to fill in those blanks. So that's what I would say. And I think the only thing we haven't mentioned is extra innings softball does go out during the summer and the fall. Some, obviously, it's probably more local to where we all live and what we do, because we don't have a budget that goes forever. So if you want us to be at more national tournaments, you're going to have to help us increase our membership so that the money goes up in the company. So, but yeah, we do put our eyes on it as much as we can. Anytime I'm out watching Macy play, I'll go around and watch other teams and I'll pick up sheets. And many times, especially from different tournaments that I went to this summer, I'd see a name pop up and go, oh, hey, I watched her play. And I'd go grab my folder to see what I wrote down, because it's what I did for a living for so long. I can make those things, But I think if you were to answer how many eyes actually get to see your daughter or your players before she's ranked, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's more now than it's ever been. With our regional board, with us reaching out to the organizational leaders to say, hey, you have 20 kids ranked within your organization, rank them 1 through 20. Like, who better can do it? And even with coaches who had 5 or 6 players, hey, rank your players 1 through 5 off of your team. And they'd go, oh my gosh, that's really hard. And we'd go, really? Is it? Now think about 1,200 that these people are trying to do.
Yeah.
So I think the more that information gets out, the better. But I know for my wrap, what I would love to say is basically, I want you to understand a few things. It's the detail in the nomination. It's the strength of schedule. It's the achievements. Are they making PGF or Alliance all tournament teams? That part of it. What does your coach say about you? The live evaluations when possible, and to be thorough and fair, we have to give each one of those athletes as much information and look to that ranking committee to be able to do it. So I would highly suggest that you're as detailed in that nomination form. Pay attention to it. Reach out. If your players are injured, get with Jayden so we can get them on a overcoming adversity or a Faith Friday or anything that gets them recognition in doing that. But I just would love to say again, and I'd love for you guys to do your final thoughts, is we are different than the other companies out there. I'll say it, we're better. And the reason we're better is because we don't do favors. We don't pick up the phone and we don't rank our athletes as quick. People nominate and they're like, when's it coming out? When's it coming out? And I'm thinking, it just closed and there's 1,200 of them. And we do it by position and we're calling coaches. It's not going to happen as fast. I wish they took more time. I wish there was more time to discuss, with people. But the facts of the matter is there's 5 classes we're always ranking. and some are graduating, some are new coming in. So in fairness to the ranking committee, at least 4 to 6 weeks per class is what it's going to take. I would beg to differ, it needs longer, but you got a business to run, you got to get them out at some point in time. So I think that's a really big thing to know, but know that it's not just the formula of the stats. It's that it does matter what tournaments you're playing in. Obviously, playing for the top 30 or 40 organizations in the country helps. It's not the end all be all. If you've got a late bloomer or somebody that's under the radar, yes, they can get recognized. And I would assume that as we move forward, more and more young women will appear on the honorable mention because more and more players are being nominated. And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And it's not a disrespectful thing to be on honorable mention. Honorable mention All-American for NC2A Division 1, 2, or 3. That's respectable.
Yep.
And that's huge. So any last thoughts from you all?
Yeah, I just think I'm going on like a year and a half of being with Extra Inning. And I know there was probably, I can't remember what class we were ranking, but we were like, we needed nominations. Like we only had maybe 500, 600. And now the ranking committee is telling us, hey, stop reaching out to these people. Like there's so many nominations. And I think that just goes to show like we're the best of the best, right? Like people want to be ranked with us. And then it also goes to show that they trust us because we're doing so many things that aren't just rankings. Like we have our ambassador program, which we haven't even mentioned. We've mentioned a ton of different other things. And I think we're about to start releasing those, our new tiers. I think we're on our 4th round of ambassadors, which is so cool. Kudos to Carie and Katie. They do a great job with them, and our ambassadors do a great job to get things for us and make content. And they're meeting maybe their future teammates in college. I think that's one thing that's really cool about it. I told a bunch of the rising stars when I was meeting with them, like, hey, you might play with these girls 10 years later, So I think that's something cool. And just going off of like this whole episode, like our rankings committee does a great job. They have a ton of connections with college coaches, with travel ball coaches. They've played the game, and I think that's one of the biggest things. And yeah, Laina, do you have anything else?
Yeah, this group is so talented and it's so good for the softball community. And I'm sure that every class, we're just going to be blown away with the level of talent and the actual sheer number of nominations who are all competing and excelling with such talent. That's why it's so important that everyone that's involved in the ranking process, except for us who are the liaisons going back and forth, everyone is anonymous because we want it to be completely objective, right? And a lot of you guys, I mean, you're proud to say that you're honorable mention all state. Why would you not be incredibly proud to say that you're honorable mention all national with the best of the best talent? Like, that's the message I want you guys to hear, is that we keep talking about this number 1,200. These are 1,200 of the top kids in the nation. And it's so cool to see. And when we're going back and forth with the rankings committee, there are times that I'm verifying information. I'm like, dang, they really are that good. Like their stats really are saying that they are winning these tournaments. They are representing our country, stuff like that. And I think that it's just such an honor to see what's going on in the community, both on the field, off the field. And it's a really cool thing to be a part of. And it's really an honor to see how many people are pouring back into extra inning softball, because I think they see the transparency we're trying to give them, right? We want to be honest about how we're doing things and trying to do things the right way. And, we have a nomination process. We keep everyone anonymous. We want everything to be as right and fair as possible for the kids and for the softball community at large. And I think that that's why the nominations are going up, and that's why the rankings committee's job is super hard. But I mean, I just think that no matter what ranking you get, it's just such an honor because the talent is so good and you're among the best of the best no matter what.
I think that's probably the best way to wrap up this section. We'll be having other ones on ranking. We'll be joining with Bonnie Holland, the CEO, to talk about the history of rankings and all stuff. Because the more we can get this information out, the better. And I would say make sure you go on Spotify or Apple and go get this podcast and share it with your friends, specifically with the ones that will be nominated or even our watch list going up. And I think I would be remiss to say is we know that the NFCA convention is out in Las Vegas this year, and Extra Innings Softball will have a booth there. We'll be doing recordings and giveaways and all that kind of stuff, because the biggest thing is we want to become a one-stop shop. I always compare it to Netflix. That's probably not a good thing to do right now since they're all over the news, but we want to be a one-stop shop for softballs, that whether you're 8U and a first timer, or you're 18U getting ready to sign your letter, or you're in college or on Team USA or the AU or wherever you're at, it's a one-stop place to come and be able to share things all great about the little yellow pearl we've all dedicated our entire life to. So thank you to both of you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Voices from the Field, presented by Extra Inning Softball. Don't forget to follow us on social media, subscribe to us on Spotify, and visit our website at extrainningsoftball.com for more stories, rankings, and updates from around the game. We'll see you guys next week.